I'm going to ask Kylie Billetta from Inside Indiana Vantas to come up and her panel to come up. First, we have Alan Palkowitz, President and CEO of the Indiana Biosciences Research Institute. Derek Small, Managing Director at Lucon BioVentures and Chairman and CEO of Monument Biosciences. And then we have Christian Lasagna Reeves, Director of Neurodegenerative Disorders Research Group at Stark Neurosciences Research Institute. And finally, Russell Barton, Chief Operating Officer at Acumen Pharmaceuticals. Alan, let's start with you, kind of a good big picture person. Longer term interventions, I think, are tougher to think about right now because we're all so focused on the crisis at hand. But as head of the IBRI, I think you have really good perspective. Tell us about research further down the line that gets you excited, especially what you see here in Indiana.
Well, thank you, Kylie. You know, that's a great question. And I think what everybody needs to appreciate that progress is being made, learning is being made at a fever pace. And I think what we're seeing is with the new scientific tools we have, the new programs, the emerging scientists that are being trained with these tools are giving us more and more insights into some of the fundamental drivers that actually initiate and progress the disease. We talked about heterogeneity. There's gender differences between white, black, and Hispanic populations. If you look at individuals, everybody's disease is a little bit different at a genetic level. We're understanding more about the impact of environmental factors, the connections to other organs and other disease processes. We now know that there's a great connection between the gut and brain health. All these things are giving us more and more insights into new potential targets, new potential mechanisms by which we can think about how to intervene and attack the disease, but also giving us the tools to consider unique combinations, which we've heard about, but also understanding how we can uniquely match any given therapy to the unique disease of an individual. And I think that's where we are really excited about the prospects for the future. We also are looking at ideas of different modalities. So these newer agents are antibodies. They require infusions. Some may be amenable to subcutaneous delivery, but that in itself creates an added cost and burden to the patients and the caregivers. But if we can find other means of therapies like small molecule oral drugs, that could really be a game changer. So a lot of our focus is really understanding all these unique ways we can think about intervening and potentially provide a path to this desire of precision medicine and precision clinical care.
So the opportunities you see, are they natural extensions of some of the near-term hope that we already talked about? And how do you see Indiana compared to the rest of the country?
Yes, so I think everything that's been said to this point from earlier panels is we have tremendous substrating capability and talent that's aggregated here that continues to draw research dollars, but also recruit new talent and train next generation scientists that are really going to propel us forward. But everything really builds on the work of the past. Nothing starts in absolute isolation. So if you think about the 100-year history of work in Alzheimer's disease, we're benefiting from all that work today, all the tremendous investment, the learnings, the failures, the successes, and everything that we're talking about really builds from that foundation. And that's really how science moves forward.
All right, Christian, let's go to you. You joined Stark Neurosciences Research Institute just a few years ago. Earlier this year, you were recognized as the Alzheimer's Association International Conference for your research published in Nature Neuroscience, being the most impactful Alzheimer's research over the last 2 years. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
So how might your research lead to better outcomes for people?
The project that we're working is based on how we can inhibit the aggregation of tau, the other protein that is involved in Alzheimer's. Like you have A beta forming the amyloid plaques, and you have tau that accumulate forming these tangles that Bruce mentioned during the discussion. So how we see it is more than an alternative treatment, maybe it could be a combinatory treatment, considering again what was mentioned that the immunotherapy against A beta, early you give it, it's give a better outcome in the patient, and those patients have less tangles, they have less tau aggregates. So maybe, again, more than alternative option can be a combination between both treatments. Can we decrease these tau aggregates in this patient, and also give them an immunotherapy against A beta, so they will have a better outcome. That will be the overall goal.
Russell, Acumen has an office in Carmel here in Indiana and a drug candidate that is a monoclonal antibody that could potentially treat early Alzheimer's disease. Tell us more about what you're learning and the opportunities for success.
Thank you. Yes, so our drug candidate is known as AC-193, and I'm very grateful to Bruce putting up an actual visual I can refer to maybe in a couple of comments here. So this particular antibody actually targets a specific form of amyloid beta that was on the diagram that Bruce had shown. And this is the soluble amyloid beta oligomers. This particular species has been shown to be very neurotoxic. So it seems like a good candidate to remove. And so we've taken on the task to the development of having to do a number of things to actually be able to show that we're achieving target engagement, and by that I mean that our antibody is actually binding with the target, soluble oligomers, and that's a pretty challenging task from a scientific level to develop an assay like that. We don't target the plaque, which I think we've heard a lot about so far. So, and you know, using some of the imaging agents and other technology that's been developed, that's been a bit more straightforward than we've had it. But we did develop an assay. We just completed our phase 1 study this year and have presented data both at AAIC and CTAD. And we're really pleased that, you know, the safety profile that was shown, the actual confirmation of target engagement was demonstrated as well, but also effects on biomarkers. So that, you know, we've heard a lot on how important it is to sort of track these biomarkers and what they could mean to potential, you know, treatment effects, and et cetera, is really important. So we're very pleased with the results we have. So we're excited to be starting a phase 2 study in first quarter of next year. And you know, we'll push ahead with that. The one other thing, though, I'm going to take a little bit of liberty with the question because it's what have you learned? That was the science and the medical results that we had. So just really briefly, though, you know, one of the things is a bit more organizational. So you know, we're a startup, we're a small biopharm company, and there are a lot of those in Indiana. I've come to I think fully appreciate. We started growing our company with a small group of people that left Eli Lilly and Company, and started. But we had to grow the company, so we have almost 50 employees now. So recruiting during the pandemic and recruiting post-pandemic, which hasn't been much different, is it's hard to get people to move to a location to work for a company, especially a small company. And so we've had to recruit. We've really tried to recruit in Indiana because we want to have people, you know, readily available to come into office and be able to interact face to face. But we've had to, and I think most companies have, figure out how to have, you know, really meaty science discussions, medical discussions, virtually. And we've been able to do that, I think, pretty effectively. So we have 50 employees scattered across 15 different states, and have been able to manage that pretty effectively. But our R&D office is here in Indiana.
And you said 50, 50.
50.
Great.
So we've grown a lot in the last year and a half.
That's good news. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Let's go to another young company. Derek, you're the founder of Lucon BioVentures, doing a lot of early phase work on Alzheimer's as well. Give us your perspective about the evolving Alzheimer's research in Indiana and how your team's work is different than perhaps what we're seeing elsewhere.
Sure. So I have Lucon BioVentures is really my firm to start new ventures too, new other companies, and I started that in 2007, and also started my first neuroscience company in 2007 too. And so really looked to kind of across the spectrum at different ways of maybe, you know, using academic research to make new drug candidates, and then start companies around that to be able to, you know, hopefully attract the resources to develop those in the clinical setting and hopefully commercial, one day like Lilly has and other, companies now finally after 20 years in Alzheimer's. In 2017, I moved all of the focus to neuroscience with these companies, and a very specific focus on certain disease mechanisms. I call them hallmark disease biologies for that we can develop drugs against. I did that. I'll make it personal for a second too, since so many others here and on our panels have too. And by the way, the panels have been fantastic and really, great discussion. I was a caregiver for my father, who was an early onset patient of dementia. Never officially got the Alzheimer's diagnosis because it all kind of happened actually pretty quickly. But the last 5 years were very educational for me on trying to understand actual at the patient setting. How can we think about this disease in a way that might be learning from what Alan's talking about, or Bruce explaining kind of the way we're understanding the disease biology, and kind of like Acumen has done too. Can we take that and apply that in a way that we can make new drug candidates, put a company around that, raise capital to be able to kind of augment what's been, there's huge resources from NIH, and huge resources towards individual programs inside of pharmaceutical companies, but it's still not enough. We need more. So, finding access to more capital and advancing those companies in neuro diseases, and doing that in Indiana now too. I mean, I've actually always lived here, but never been able to really have the companies that we launch here for various, kind of talent and capital resource constraints. And, it's all changed. Now, it's a little bit fortuitous that Indiana happens to be such a powerhouse in Alzheimer's disease research, and very not well known outside of the state actually still too. So it's kind of become, an opportunity to educate a community and market that a little bit more. And I love that this is, very focused on Indiana too, but we also need to get this message out outside of Indiana as well. So I've kind of lost the point of the question.
Oh, that's all right. Let's see, I already scribbled it out. Do you want to talk about how your team's work is different than what we're seeing elsewhere? Or?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
So, and I love what Acumen's doing. It's interesting. We have Christian up here, we have Alan up here, Jared's been up here too, and Jeff Daig will be coming, and Bruce Lamb. These are all actually co-founders with me of Monument as well, Monument Biosciences, and the research that they've done and our ability to kind of, advance these technologies. And what Alan was just talking about for novel approaches and kind of bringing the basic science into kind of a potential clinical reality, and augmenting things like what Eli Lilly and other companies are working on, potentially combining, as Christian just said too, these different disease targets. I think where the field has moved to, and honestly, what I saw very specifically in helping my father through the end stages of the disease, in these different episodes that come on, he would be sent to the emergency room for some basic reason, almost detrimental reason, get resuscitated, and then each time that would happen over a period of years, the cognitive impact was really clearly worse each time, and then it took longer each time to get better. And I think that what I saw in that setting too really kind of guided me to, or at least what I hoped we would be able to focus on in new therapies and new drug development. But the two categories that we focus on at Luson are synaptic function, so enhancing the synapse's ability to function, and I think that there are molecular ways that we can do that with drugs, and we've got a few companies focused on that. And what Monument's focused on, which is neuroinflammation. Broadly speaking, that includes kind of some neuroimmunological targets that I think complement or have sprouted, as Alan said, from a lot of the research over the past 100 years to kind of get here, but also including what Christian's working on too, which is a novel way of understanding the way tau aggregates form or are seeded or chaperoned from cell to cell and neuron to neuron.
Christian, good segue. Let's go to you. What else are you seeing at IU or other places in Indiana that supports or complements your work that could help uncover more solutions? That whole theory of a rising tide lifts all boats.
I think this is a perfect place, and I think the great potential. When I joined 2017 was a year after Bruce joined, and everybody was telling me this is a sleeping giant. It's gonna go big. You have to see the people that are joining. So it was a great decision to join, and then even better, the study that we published and we won the award. I'm really proud of it. But I thought that was like nice basic science with some future potential, but being again working side by side with Bruce, Alan, Derek, they took it to a complete different level, working with Jared as well. That those things, I have been working in our academic institutions in the US, and you don't have that. You have really separate the basic science with the clinical research, and here is the integration is amazing, plus the component of the industry, like Alan with all these experience, the treat AD. So they took this knowledge that we got from this study to something that could be a reality. I'm not saying in a super near future, but much more near than what I thought at the beginning, you know? So I don't even need to live by you to think that what I discover or my students discover in a mouse, in a Drosophila model, or post-mortem brain samples can really be beneficial from patients, and we can do all that in Indiana or at IU for sure. So that's for me, it's pretty unique.
Very good. Russell, you already touched on a talent topic, so we have another talent question for you. Any thoughts on how the talent across Indiana can do even more to learn from one another, or like we've discussed too, share with the rest of the country in the spirit of finding solutions?
Yeah, thanks, Kyla. That's a good question, and I think incredibly important question as well. I mean, science has always been based on collaboration and sharing of data and building, taking that next step in knowledge. And I've been involved in on the pharmaceutical side, Alzheimer's research, clinical research since the mid-90s. And things have changed a lot. But the one thing that really hasn't changed is something that I think just really satisfies me personally, but it's also very energizing, is the level of collaboration between academics, pharma companies, the Alzheimer's Association is always in the middle of bringing all that together as well. The level of collaboration and sort of collegial interaction is just always been an incredibly high level compared to any other area I've ever worked. And so that's, I think, really important as a backstop to sort of how can we take that and make it better. So I think, I think I have two answers to that question. One's kind of a formal, a proposal for more formal interactions, and one is informal. So for the formal interaction, I think that, and actually, Derek, you just touched on this. I think that as we sit here and kind of focus on Indiana, I think we all have a good understanding of the incredible researchers that we have now here in Indiana. We have a remarkable large pharma company in Lilly being here. There's just a huge number of small biopharm and biotech companies that are sprouting up. We've got such an incredible base here. I think we need to develop maybe more formal opportunities to come and have discussions and share data. Share information, share ideas about sort of what the future is going to look like and how we're going to get there. I was really encouraged. I was talking to Alan earlier, and I think there's some things in the works to try to make some of those more formal interactions happen. Those things are happening like in a lot of different places. A lot of venues in the U.S., a lot of global venues. I don't think I've ever been invited to one that's here in Indiana. So I think if we can make those happen, I think it just really starts to shine a light on what an incredible talent base we have here in Indiana. So I would encourage, the potential big sponsors of that. We have IBRI and Lilly and others to come together and make that happen. The informal answer to that question, I think, is something that I've come to appreciate a lot since joining Acumen and growing with Acumen. I mean, this goes back to Derek as well. So back when we first were bringing the team together, we were a very virtual company, but we wanted to have time to be able to interact face to face. Derek was kind enough to let us use some of the conference rooms in where Assembly Biosciences was. And of course, there were I think, at least 2 other small biofarm companies that were using space as well. And the amount of just sort of that co-location and the opportunity to have those, cross-group conversations is really important. So it started there for us. We're in fact, I'm going to say, past the transition. As of November 1st, we're formally located our office now in 16 Tech, which is down here in the downtown area. So we're literally next door neighbors to IBRI now and other really exciting companies to be around. So that level of just being there, being co-located, the spontaneous interactions that we can have to share data, get excited about things, and kind of support each other, I think that's sort of something that rises the tide for everybody.
And Alan, he already touched on 16 Tech, which obviously is your home. Not to spend too much time on it, but is there anything else you want to add on as far as 16 Tech and just how it plugs into the Alzheimer's landscape here in Indiana?
Oh, absolutely. 16 Tech, if you ever want to come by, you're more than welcome to visit the 16 Tech District and certainly our facility at the IBRI. And I think what you would see is a really buzzing, exciting environment of scientists and business professionals really trying to move the needle for Indiana across multiple diseases, including Alzheimer's disease. One of the strategic areas of focus for us at the IBRI is to work with the growing Alzheimer's community and bring some additional tools and insights and talent to really add and synergize with the academic scientists and some of the new businesses that are emerging to really do things that otherwise would not be possible or we didn't imagine several years ago. And I think that is going to be really important in continuing to catalyze and drive some of these advances that we're seeing across the spectrum of basic science all the way into clinical research.
And if you haven't been there, there's a really great place to eat called the Amp. If you're a food person, it's got some really, really neat spots, some local vendors. I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but this was not in the questions you were given, so hopefully I don't get a lot of blank stares. But as I'm covering health, the major hot topic right now is AI. And do any of you want to comment on how AI plugs into any of this? It seems like it's advancing almost faster than we can get our hands around. Is that a big part of any of your research? Or do any of you just want to share your thoughts on AI and how perhaps is that going to step on the gas pedal as far as Alzheimer's research?
I'll take it. Just to start. Yeah, so, from the research perspective, AI, it's a term that, kind of gets recycled a bit. But a lot of the fundamentals behind AI and AI concepts have been out there for some time, maybe in more rudimentary forms. But I think the advent of new computational capabilities, supercomputers, and new types of ways of analyzing data have really made the tools much more robust and useful. But the concepts have been there, and the concepts has always been, how do we use data information to really, complex sets of data information to help us get our hands around complex problems and develop new hypotheses and how to move them forward with an experimental plan to actually yield an outcome. And so I think that is continuing to mature. I think you'll see it across Purdue, IU, certainly at the IBRI. We're using it for different purposes. I think it's going to be really helpful in understanding and diagnosing patients based on maybe an understanding of their genetics and triangulating it to other potential disease drivers. I think we'll see many, many uses in the future that really enhance the work of scientists. But the one thing I will say, and some may disagree with me, but it will never replace the inquisitive scientist, the fearless scientist that passionate about an idea and really wants to really drive knowledge. It'll be a complement, maybe make them more powerful, but I never see it as a true replacement.
As the human scientists. All right, Russell, you kind of lit up when I brought up AI.
Just a short statement, and it's maybe from a more operational aspect, but just the idea, clinical trials, and I would say especially clinical trials in AD that are long, there's so many components to it. We have an obligation, we talked about how precious a resource it is to find somebody that's willing to enter as a patient into a clinical trial. We need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make that experience, not as burdensome as I think it has been in the past. So, using AI to look at, previous study designs, how they work, how patients flow, the flow of different procedures that are done, things like that. So, just starting to touch the idea of how can we make clinical trials much more streamlined, much less burden on the patients and their caregivers. And that'll be good for everybody. I mean, it'll to John's earlier points too, we need to figure out how to do things faster, cheaper, and I think when we add on making it easier for patients to get through a trial, there's a lot of information that can be cycled through a computer to kind of help us understand sort of what, just making different little changes can do to helping us make the whole thing better and more efficient.
Derek, let's go to you. Do you see any natural synergies between the later stage and the early stage research? Does one benefit the other?
I think how Alan started off the conversation, I mean, it's all been building on itself, in my opinion, too. And I think even as we kind of look at the landscape of, what Acumen's working on as kind of an extension or a next generation of maybe what Lilly and Eisai and others have been working on over years too, and then there's a next extension. There's kind of this middle group of the different therapies in mid-stage clinical trials of development that has been built on kind of what we learned along that time frame too. I don't think it's any different right now, even though we're, as far as Monument and kind of like where Stark Neurosciences has the majority of research, it's building on what was learned previously, and absolutely I think that has a congruency. In some cases it's orthogonal, but I think it's definitely connected in a way that we should be looking at combination therapies, and as we are, I think Alan's the IBRI has quite a resource for Alzheimer's molecular development, and he's established, has manufactured pretty much every monoclonal antibody that's been in development so far. We at Monument are developing small molecules that kind of are kind of flipping into the cell. The antibodies tend to target things that are outside of the cellular, outside of the cell. We're kind of flipping into the cell, but the idea is maybe that's going to change expression, maybe that's going to change the response, maybe that's going to help maybe lower dose, increase safety, for these different approaches that we can take with these drugs. And I do want to, and kind of that's a good question, and I think really when Christian was he was given his award at the Alzheimer's Association meeting in Amsterdam this year, and it's a really big meeting for our field, for Alzheimer's. For anybody who's familiar with like oncology, there's an ASCO conference, which is kind of the big clinical and even somewhat preclinical. It's kind of the ASCO of Alzheimer's. And thousands, I think it was the largest attendance this year at AIC, over 8,000 people that came to Amsterdam too. I mean, it's not like it was it's pretty easy to get to Amsterdam, I guess, for the globe, but I think, as far as populated, it was really outstanding. And it is global, so we are kind of complaining that not too many people know about Indiana. Maybe that's because we aren't, kind of marketing ourselves to a huge extent, but it's not because we aren't out there. So here at this international conference, the Stark Neuroscience Group, IU broadly, had over 150 posters, presentations, and data, disclosures at this conference. I think the closest second, I don't want to say which institution it was around 50. Okay, so it's a major, amount of information. Christian was one of 10 different plenary sessions when he received his award. So there's 10 plenary sessions, which of course are kind of supposed to be kind of the pinnacle disclosures. IU had representation in 7 of the 10 plenary sessions too. So I'm just trying to kind of establish the credibility a little bit, and how it really is a global impact that the Indiana groups are having. And to get back to your question, though, when Christian gave his presentation, just did such a nice job giving credit, really, to all of the different pieces that come together to help you make these big decisions. Like, there are big discoveries that get awards, but you have to have the preclinical disease model resource. You have to have the ability to do different experiments and advance different clinical preclinical studies to make these big discoveries and get these disclosures made. And he did the majority of that, at Indiana University, and in a way that is if you look at his research and really dig in, it's building on what kind of a couple other disparate sciences are adding to what we previously knew about Alzheimer's disease, what we previously knew about tau in particular, for how that impacts the disease and how maybe can we focus on the most toxic parts of tau. And so it really did have a thread from the beginning, as from the 100 years ago discoveries and the drawings that Dr. Alzheimer's made, and now how we're kind of getting now into the more specific areas that might be the most impactful to patient outcome. But it's still, in my opinion, it's all still very connected.
All connected. So as we near the end of this panel, Alan, big picture question for you. What should people know about the progress Indiana is making? What is the messaging when it comes to Alzheimer's research?
Yeah, so I think what I would say is, Indiana scientists, clinicians, business professionals, advocates, they're making hope real. And I think that, this past year, I think we talked about being an inflection with these new medicines that are coming out, and certainly we're anxiously awaiting the donanemab will add to options for patients. I mean, this is truly an inflection point, and people living and working here in Indiana have worked together not only to make that possible, but also lay the groundwork for hopefully future discoveries. And my hope is that future generations from now, when they'll have therapeutic options, they'll have treatments, potential cures for Alzheimer's. They won't be dealing with all the hardships of watching, parents and loved ones decay due to this disease. We'll look back and say that, these people here working today in Indiana stood up to the plate and made a difference. And I think that would be something everybody should aspire for.
All right. Well, we actually have just a little bit under 10 minutes left, so we can open it up for audience Q&A for 10 minutes or so. Lunch is next, so we don't want to go too long. I don't want to keep you from your food. You can hear them upstairs. They're getting it ready. So if anyone out there has a question you'd like to ask, don't leave me hanging. Go ahead and raise your hand. We've got a room full of all sorts of thoughtful people with lots of expertise. So does anyone have a question for anyone here on our panel? All right, there's got to be someone. Don't be shy. Okay. Well, then we'll go, since we don't have any questions. You go ahead.
Meanwhile, kind of like the Jeopardy music, while someone comes up with a question, I'll share a couple other vignettes.
Okay.
That go to some of the earlier topics about risk and trying to understand patient treatment flows and what's next and what's new. What's maybe not so new, but what is unique. In addition, I want to give a little promotion to Dr. Broche, but also kind of maybe also highlight a risk. I think I'm actually a pretty high risk person. I mentioned my father, my uncle on my mother's side too, also had a Lewy body dementia and went through. But my mother, when we're starting this new company in Alzheimer's. And I was letting my mother know about this company in particular, and actually she'd been to Indiana University and kind of seen this major resource that we have for treating patients too. It's not just research, it's actually really helping patients. And she said, well, if you're going to IU and to talk to researchers, they had been through probably 15 different physicians in the last 10 years, as my uncle got worse and worse. And she always actually really hated going to any sort of clinic, but she said the most wonderful person that we got to work with through all of that was there. His name's Dr. Jared Broche. If you see him, make sure you tell him that was a wonderful experience. So I want to make sure we really do highlight, though, the patient care resource for late-stage patients, early-stage patients that we're talking about here, too. People from all over the United States come to Indianapolis, from Chicago. They will bring them to Indianapolis because there's an integrated care network. There's good people like Dr. Broche, good bedside manner, too, to help them in addition to, kind of give them a deep research insight as well.
Yes. Go ahead, Russell.
I just, I see there's 4 minutes left.
That is correct.
But I think everybody else got to answer a question about what gives you hope.
Right, yes.
So I'm a pretty hopeful person. So I think what's amazing to me, somebody, like I mentioned before, been involved in clinical research from a pharmaceutical perspective since the 90s. And I've lived through a lot of development programs, a lot of, and I'm not going to call them failures, but negative studies. And I'm not calling them failures because so much information on all those negative studies led to how are we going to do the next study, how are we going to design the next drug. So I think it all builds on each other. But we're at a time now in 2023. This is just what amazes me. 5 years ago, going to meetings was, it was just hearing about one failed study after another. It took an emotional toll, I think, on all of us. Now we're in 2023, and we're talking about options. Not will we get something, but we're talking about options now, but also probably, I'm going to assume more options in the next few years. And I think that's just remarkable. So when you talk about hope, I think that this is an incredible sort of inflection. I think inflection's been used, but I can't think of more hope than we're going to have options. And the fact that so many other, mechanisms of action, targets are being investigated now. There really is, I think we've heard before, the idea of combination therapies is likely going to be the, where we're going to have to go to see, really stopping the disease. And the fact that we've got options to bring things together and look for that, those combinations that are really going to affect, in an incredibly dramatic way, people's lives I can't think of anything more hopeful than that.
All right, we got about 2 minutes left. If any of the rest of you want to comment on hope.
Just to mention one point that we haven't discussed in this panel is, for example, the study that we published that now we're following for hopefully a possible treatment. All this starts from basic research in the lab done by students and postdoc, and with the support with the Alzheimer's Association, a pilot grant was good amount of money, not a multi-million project, but that was the seed for us to get more funding, enhance the project, start collaborations, do techniques that are a little bit more pricey, but that initial seed is key, like supporting, I think IU and the START for sure. We have been doing a great job with the grad student program, the postdocs that we are recruiting, building the team, and they are the ones that start everything that is going for a treatment was originally a student that developed that first antibody or discovered that A-beta or discovered, in the case, Basum, the protein that we're working. So it's not that every single project has to be a multi-million-dollar project like what the Alzheimer's Association in Indiana, the Alzheimer's Association in the US in general. These pilot projects are key, like to motivate the people in the lab, generate the very first finding that then other people start getting excited. So I think that's also the IU has been doing great in the institute. Sometimes people say 20, 30,000 is not a lot when you talk about clinical trials, obviously. But for us, that's really important. That's really important to start kick the ball and start things running in order to eventually come where we are right now with successful or all successful clinical trials. So that's something that people need to also evaluate and understand how important it is for sure.
Thank you very much for your time.